The question is about how to survive abuse, but I want to change that, not instead of surviving abuse, but protecting yourself from becoming abused or being placed within a situation or an encounter or the experiencing of abuse, how to avoid that. Avoiding abuse requires you first to identify that there is abuse, that's occurring. This is even more important as far as your first, the front line of defense. How to identify that this is happening. The problem is that with the abused person facing a set of abusers or even a single abuser, because the chances are if you are being abused by a person, there are others as well. You just haven't put the finger on them yet, as the saying goes. You haven't expanded your peripheral vision to see the extent of the abuse you're undergoing. So first, we have to identify that there is abuse. It could be a workplace environment, it could be a spouse. One of the things that I would notice a lot in society in regards to abuse is the physical abuse that people talk about. It's terrible. It's to be physically abused. It's inhumane. But there's a far more devastating, more threatening, more terrible kind of abuse. The one that doesn't necessarily leave physical marks. I'm talking about the psychological and the emotional abuse that go on, which, given the dynamic of a relationship, sooner or later manifests in some kind of a physical manifestation. Physical could be somebody firing you. Physical manifestation could be somebody coming over and slashing your tires. What we call passive-aggressive behavior. Even when someone says good morning, but the way they say it, you know there's something there. So that's a physical, it's getting closer and closer to becoming physical manifestation. And when you put these people together, as in the case of a domestic situation or even educational environment, some type of a environment where there's constant contact with each other in one form or another, it starts taking on material form. Even if you were, let's say, faculty members at a university or a college or a school, you come back and you notice that your food's missing from the fridge. Something is, almost harmless looking, but in fact there is the morphing of the psychological and emotional threat into something more, close to home, as it were, to deprive you of food, for example. And of course, the big one in that area of material manifestation of abuse would be physical abuse. You have cases of that, with children, with spouses, with elderly abuse. You probably have seen footage of captured video of nursing homes, nurses abusing elderly people because they're not falling asleep when they want them to fall asleep, or take their medicine when they don't want to take the medicine, or other things. It's horrific. So yes, there is the physical abuse, but what our society neglects to consider is, or focus on, where the big volcano is the emotional abuse. You hear someone, oh, they slapped this person, or they said something that was so uncalled for. Why did they do that? Why did they say that? Why did they yell like that, for example? I just said this. You didn't have to get so triggered and blow up like a, Mount St. Helens on me all of a sudden, Okay. Whenever that situation happens, it's always good to go ahead and explore what's going on beyond the physical. So this is a challenge for many people. Now, I'm not minimizing physical abuse. I was abused growing up. My father used to beat me. School teachers used to beat me growing up in primary school, in elementary school. They had rulers. They would use the sharp side of the ruler, the wooden rulers, to hit us on the knuckles, on the backs of the metatarsals, on the back of your hand, for example, slapping, etc. So I know abuse. The last time my father slapped me was when I was 18. In full view of my family members, who stood there, did nothing, didn't say anything. So I know abuse. Also relationship abuse, physical abuse from, life partners. So that exists, of course. But the other big one, underlying, the quiet demon that is pulling all the strings, is what is simmering underneath, the thing that keeps the fire burning, which keeps boiling the stew, which every once in a while the bubble pops, and that you can think of it as a physical abuse. So the big one is the emotional one, psychological, which has to do with understanding. What I mean by that is, when the physical abuse is happening, it's obvious, this, so you want to, you want to confront them, or you want to run away, usually, right? It's a threat. It's a threat to your own survival, integrity, etc. But when you look at the tolerance of abuse, which is what we're talking about. So how do you, or why would a person tolerate abuse, which is suffering? Your heart rate increases. Your blood pressure increases. You feel like somebody just, you're starting to bleed, basically. Your circulatory system isn't working because now you're bleeding out your blood, almost, because you're feeling completely powerless to be there in the presence of that person. It's almost like a vampire. You're in the presence of a vampire. So that's why a lot of people get threatened. I noticed this in couples therapy, in the way they sit. The couple would come and one of them would sit like in the knees pointing in a certain way, or, or try to avoid the session, come up with excuses. So I had to see them separately, this and that, and just to make them feel comfortable. And then I would see the dynamic from the body language, what's going on. And then in a very meticulous way, very carefully, bring up certain questions, and sometimes Be direct. I've been a very direct kind of therapist that would shock people. Because there's this whole mirage, this whole nonsensical superficiality that people carry to hide. And the big one, the worst, I would say, is the one we tell ourselves, the lies we tell ourselves when we maintain our presence in an abusive relationship. This is key. Because when and if you find yourself in a relationship that is abusive, that is not the only one you've been in that was abusive. You have had other abusive relationships prior. Now, people will resist this. Sometimes they'll say, no, that's incorrect because this is the only person that has abused me. Well, hold on. Let's look at this. Relationship with your mother, how was that? Relationship with your dad or your school teacher or your siblings? Did you have a voice in your own family, for example? Among your siblings? Did you always have to second what they're saying, what they're agreeing to? Did you have to come and join the chorus, in a sense, to approve, to show your approval? Or did you have a difference in opinion, yet nevertheless nothing came out of your mouth? It almost was like you had invisible hands on your throat, closing your mouth, not allow you to speak. What was that? Did you, for example, ask yourself that your opinions don't matter? Or that what you wanted to say was not relevant, even though you knew you had to say something, but you didn't. So the abused person gives up on themselves, which is the worst kind of abuse, really. Because the overwhelming pressure from the world around them, now they might be actually applying pressure on you by mocking you, by bullying you emotionally, psychologically, socially, physically in some cases, right? Where you hush yourself up. That is, you've taken the baton and you're now running their race for them by abusing yourself, because those people are dead and gone or out of your life, physically out of your life, but you are carrying their legacy. That is terrible. For this reason, many people carry the pain of yesterday. They go to psychoanalysis for decades and nothing gets resolved. Oh, my mommy did this, my mommy did that, my dad did this, and okay, where does it stop? Well, it can't stop. It's impossible to stop so long as you are running with the baton, their baton, and for them, you're running their race. What I mean by that, you are continuously abusing yourself or placing yourself in similar circumstances where the abuse of you is continuing on. This is where people go and select partners or jobs or friends where there is a bigger, higher potential for getting abused. This is very sneaky. Think of it as an algorithm that's gone off whack. There's a bug in the system. You are jumping into the fire and then complaining, why am I burning? But why do I do this? That's another question. But the question could be relevant if the person wants to put something behind it. You have to put your life behind your word. You have to put your life behind what you believe in. You have to put your life, you have to infuse it with life. What this thing is that you say matters for you. Most of the abused individuals do not care for themselves, really. It's a very reactionary attitude. Why? Why do they not care? It's, by the way, for many people, that's a very bombastic statement. Well, the fact is, why is the person back into some type of a terrible, horrendous situation again? To make a list of memories, of similar abusive characters in their life? Where does that leave them? In pain and sorrow and suffering. So it takes responsibility to really pull yourself up from your shoestrings and get out of the abusive relationship. And this is where the understanding has to come in. Honesty has to be there for understanding to take place. The person has to say, my sibling who comes in and says, what you did over there is not correct, or you should call this person, you should call your auntie, or you should call your mom, you should call, when, let's say, the person has abused you. Or they've cut contact with you. And now you are again the person who has to come in to build bridges again, which they burned. And if you're the abused type, you're going to go and say, okay, feel guilty. And you go, I guess I have to do this, I have to do that, okay, I have to, okay. What are you doing? You are running their race again. You are carrying on their tune at whose cost? Your cost. You are not happy. Ask yourself, do I really want to live with my mouth closed, with their invisible hand on me? As I said, they might have been dead and gone for decades, but you're still carrying on that habit of not saying what you really want to say. Well, who will say it if you don't? If you won't? You only have you. Now, Buddhism comes and says, well, make sure that when you're about to say that, is it true? Is what you're about to say true? Is it infused with loving kindness? Would you like to hear it if somebody said that to you? Well, if it's true and it's abusive, this and that, you might not like to hear it if you're the abuser. That's not as important as it being true. And is it going to be helpful if I say this to them? Is this going to help me? That's another question we need to ask. Does this thing does it need to be said? But if you're losing sleep over this, you need to revisit it. You cannot bury it. And the abused person learns to bury everything that is authentic about life. So the abused individual becomes their own prisoner. Actually, the prison warden. The person locks oneself up, deprives oneself of life. And it's a terrible, terrible thing to experience. So that's why many people, you see billions of people walking around, in my travels, especially through airports, bus stations and things, train stations, I would see people's faces just hanging, drawn southward. They don't want to even engage with eye contact with each other. That's why they go, it's something as impersonal as a phone. It's safer. It's safer. You have the semblance of being in control when you're not, because your life is not. You're not in control of your life. And there's so much abuse going on. You have entire populations being abused. But the community, the population, even the family is comprised of individuals. So make sure that you see that you are being abused, and you need to stand up for yourself. You need to say. Now, that terrible image that I just described of when I was 18, I was slapped by my father the last time. I was already 6'5", 6'5", 6'5". inches in height. I was bigger than anybody in our family, extended family. And I looked at him, and it was impossible for me to, of course, to retaliate, physically. That's in our family, that was not acceptable. And for me, at least, it was unacceptable. So I looked at my dad, but I could feel the rage in me. I could not retaliate. I could not. But I felt the pain. I felt the rage. I felt the unfairness. I felt the hurt. And I felt my muscles moving. The blood was rushing. My face was all red, I'm sure, because my hands were all fisted up. But I kept them behind me. There was a lot of anger, but I knew that I was being abused because of what I had said. Because I had said that I don't agree with what you're saying here. I'm not going to take part in this play of this camouflaging, is hiding what's going on. But my body reacted. And I told him, I cannot hit you back, I said. I said those words to him. I was being honest. That's what I'm trying to say. But there was also a clash within me, and tears came down my face. There was no hug, no nothing afterwards, So I just walked away. But I'm glad to say that I was able to say a few words. Authentic, felt, experienced words. Now, when we are abused, we even deprive ourselves from saying what we need to say. Now, I'm not saying go ahead and place yourself in a position where you are being abused, whether emotionally, which is the worst, as I said, from someone else, that is. Abuse is abuse, abuse is abuse, It's terrible through and through in all its spectrum. But the abuse that we get from someone else, the emotional abuse, the manipulation we talk about. That's why when there's domestic abuse, people would talk about it. I would ask to find out before this person. Usually in America, they would blame the man, let's say, in a relationship. Well, I spoke with even police officers and things, and individuals who handle violence. Several of those police officers were in fact the victims in their own relationships, but they were afraid to come forward, officially meet with a psychologist or a psychotherapist to report. Because even if they call the police and the police comes and they see a huge 5'11" or 6'2" guy standing at the door with tears in his eyes, and then they see a 5'2" woman sitting, behind, immediately they know who to point the finger at as the abuser, and it's not going to be the 5'2" lady over there. That's a cultural huge stigma, and I came across this again and again and again. It's a terrible part of society which people are not talking about. The neglected minority, men. I wanted to write a book on it when I was a layman. But, now that doesn't mean that that's throughout, of course not. There's some terrible men out there who are abusive, who go and drink or who do other things, and they come and take it out on their spouses, on their wives, on their kids. That's a fact. There's also women who do that. A lot of women, a lot of, the female partners and not just in heterosexual relationships. You see this across the board, everywhere. The abuse is itself a call for the person to stand up and to say what needs to be said, and then make a decision and to possibly, hopefully, rectify the situation, fix the situation by bringing things into the open, talking about it. But before that happens, there needs to be understanding gained by the individuals involved. But that understanding will never take place unless you come out and say it, the truth, honestly. Listen, this is what's happening to me. Every time we talk about this, you say this, but this outcome, the opposite of what I want, what you say you also want, happens. This has happened 3-4 times already. I don't think I'm ready for a 5th time. I need something else. And when you see the other person isn't able to see you, meet you halfway, then that is a call from life to you. Hey, stop making this stupid choice of lingering on in this relationship. Because there's more to life than getting abused, you know. You shouldn't just be always dodging attacks. That's not life. You need to enjoy life and let them go ahead and live their life, and their issues have to be figured out on their own because you've tried to help them, but they turned you into victim number 36 in their life. They're not there to be a punching bag of anyone, for anyone, especially your own. That's another reason why I recommend individuals to go and be seen by a qualified therapist. Or at the very, very, very least, get a journal, sit down and write what you're going through. Not just ideas, but especially feelings embodied within the body. Things that you're experiencing. If you can start from there to honestly write down, express, you can even, in a safe environment when there's no one around, speak out loud the things you're feeling. Because many of the individuals who are abused, they don't even give themselves the right to think about the fact that they're abused, which is, a case of, the cognitive dissonance and the gaslighting that they have undergone, sometimes for decades. It's terrible. That is why a human being, an adult, experienced human being, would not go and continue the abuse that he underwent or she underwent in their past. That's what I was referring to as running someone else's race for them, continuing the abuse that others gave you. No one would do that. But the person has mentally deprived oneself from expressing the ouch. I once had a teacher, he said, for every pinch there's an ouch. If there's a pinch, there has to be an ouch. Where's your ouch? It has to come out. That's why I was saying working with a therapist, a qualified, good therapist, really works, helps. But if you don't have that option for some reason, or you don't have the courage at least, go get yourself a journal. Not a laptop, not a notepad for you to, like a digital notepad or keyboard. No, you need to use your hand. There's a connection with the eyes, with the fingers, with the hand, the wrist, the arm. All that involvement gets it more, gets it to reveal more. And that's where you're going to gain more and more understanding as to who it is that is living this life. Is it those people, the abusers, for whom you were the victim always, and you always went back to such relationships? Because only an abused person who's still carrying on that type of a lifestyle will go back to that kind of a toxic relationship, which is, by the way, as I mentioned earlier, a key question that keeps popping up in people's conversations, especially when they would go to, therapist or a teacher. Why do I attract the wrong, you know? It's not a matter of you attracting. You're jumping headfirst into such things because you don't know any better. You think. Because you don't allow yourself to have the voice. You have to speak up. And don't forget to put your life behind the truth that you discover. That is living fully, that is living authentically. Life is not a word, it's a reality of how you want to spend it. Happy or in constant sorrow, misery. That's what Buddhism is all about, to pull us out of misery, to show us the way out of suffering by giving us information, knowledge. Once it's applied, that information in your life through protecting yourself, becoming more virtuous. You cannot be virtuous with other things, let's say, not killing, not harming, not lying to other people, yet be non-virtuous towards yourself, lying to yourself. And many individuals who are abused or are being abused are lying to themselves because there's an image of, oh, if he could just be like this, or if she could just be like that, or this, it's only like 10 times, out of 10 things that she does, yeah, 9 are bad, but there's that one time when she does that, it's like, oh my God, it's incredible. No, that's intolerable. That is you lying to you. You are not living with virtue. You are not protecting yourself. That's why Lord Buddha always talk about sila, which is the virtuous life code. There's sila, samadhi, which is the second one, which is mental cultivation, meditation, and then there's panya, which is wisdom. The first rung is absolutely necessary. They all are, but to build, especially mental cultivation, to have meditation happen for you properly, you cannot be without sila, virtue. The first things first, we start being virtuous towards ourselves. You're protecting yourself so you can sleep better. You can know that you have nothing to make up a story about, to lie about, if you say the truth. You don't have to remember anything, as Mark Twain says, when you are saying the truth. A person who tells lies will have to come up with, what should I do? Oh, we'll try to remember, but I said this over there, so I have to say this here. No. It's abusive. So not living with virtue is also abuse. First with yourself, abusing yourself. So if you have enough respect for yourself, you cannot allow someone to abuse you. But that often has happened from enough times in the past where it has become the norm, the routine. So pull yourself out of that. And life is waiting for you to be enjoyed, to be experienced, to come out of the misery and experience happiness and peace. That's where the happiness comes from. Not having that agitated state. You're not fighting with yourself. Even there's nobody around you, but you're no longer abusing yourself and by remorse or guilt. There's peace. And that's how you can actually practice mindfulness and meditation, because you're not fighting with yourself. And when you combine these two, suddenly you get glimpses of insight. And people look at you and they say, you look different. You're more calm. You're more wise. That's the third. That's called panya. So put your life behind that.